Good morning and welcome to the Unitarian Society of Santa Barbara. And I could see you all wanted to say good morning back when I said it, so good morning. Good morning. Good morning to you here in our physical sanctuary. Good morning to those of you who are joining us from afar, gathered in our Zoom sanctuary. Whoever you are becoming, whoever you have been, whoever you love, however it is that you arrive to this place this morning, you are welcome here. We are a loving community of seekers striving to live with integrity, nurture wonder, and inspire the actions that transform us and transform the world. It's good to be together this morning. I'm the Reverend Julia Hamilton, and I'm joined by our worship associate, Peter Hale, by Heather Levin on the piano, Matthew Grissett, our music director, and our fabulous choir, and all of you who have taken the time this morning to be here. I'd like to extend a special welcome to any visitors, friends, and family joining us this morning. If you're online, there's a connection card you can click a link to, and here in person, there's a little yellow card in your order of service, and that'll let us stay in touch with you about what's going on here at the Unitarian Society on Sundays and throughout the week. You can just drop that card in the offertory when it goes by, or stop by our welcome table afterwards for coffee and tea and conversation. Ask all the questions you like. We love questions here in this community, and we would love to get to know you and keep in touch. We have a lot coming up in the life of this congregation over the next month as we head into February already. Goodness. But today, January 28th, is the last chance to sign up for our Connection Circles for this season. Connection Circles are our small groups that meet twice a month to reflect together on big questions and big themes of life. They're a wonderful way to get to know each other more deeply in a space that's a little different from the socialization of coffee hour. So if you haven't signed up for a Connection Circle but you're interested, you can talk to Carol Schwitzer. Carol, where are you? There's Carol right there. Carol will be out in the courtyard. You can also find information about Connection Circles online. We do have Zoom Connection Circles as well as in-person ones. It's a wonderful way to get connected. The Earth Advocates have an environmental film screening once a month, and so coming up the first week in February, there's going to be the February screening. This is a great way to see some artists reflecting on the way we engage with the environmental issues of our time in this critical time. So I encourage you to stop by the Earth Advocates table, find out more about the upcoming film and ways that you can get engaged as we address the climate crisis together. We're also taking nominations for our outreach offering, our partnerships that go on a 2-year cycle. Every month we choose somebody to be partnered with, and we need your input about the programs and projects that you see in our community that we might want to consider supporting. So if you have a nomination, please stop by and talk to Gail Fairburn right there, there's Gail, and you can also contact her online if you want to nominate someone that way. And finally, I want to offer up a wonderful way to get connected and be of service to this community, and that's by volunteering to be an usher or a greeter or a coffee host. If you're newer and maybe you're looking for a way to help out, that's very easy entry. Being a part of the Sunday morning team once a month is a wonderful way to meet people as you help create a welcoming environment here in the congregation. You can talk to Angie in our front office, our membership and outreach coordinator, and she can tell you more about what it means to serve on Sunday morning as part of our hospitality team. Whew. Oh, and there is one more. Yes, thank you for reminding me. The Alliance, one of the oldest organizations affiliated with this congregation. The Alliance meets every Friday, every first Friday of the month in Parish Hall, and they're going to be talking with the Santa Barbara Audubon Society about the birds around us and how we can be in relationship with the natural world through our relationship with birds. And I know, how many of you are birders, participate in the bird count, pay attention? Yeah, there's quite a few folks in the congregation for whom this is a passion. So join the Alliance on Friday afternoon. Whew, again, there's a lot going on in this congregation, a lot going on in our lives, a lot going on in this world. So I invite you now to take a breath with me. Allow yourself to arrive fully to this moment, to be present here with this community as I ring our bell and let the sound connect us.
As we gather together for worship this morning, both far and near, we light our chalice as we do each week. It is the symbol of our faith. May its light be a beacon of hope for the many, for those who feel lost, for those who feel threatened, for those who feel tired, those who are uncertain. May our beacon of hope help you find your way home, help you feel safe, give you respite, and honor your searching mind and spirit.
We have another flame to kindle this morning, and that is our flame of memory. And we're honoring the memory of two folks who are connected to the life of this congregation and have had a deep impact on this community. And the first is the Reverend Jim Grant. That's a sound many people, I expect, make upon hearing Jim's name. Jim was the interim minister of this congregation from 1999 to 2001. And he arrived after a time of great hurt and heartache. And he, over the course of his interim ministry, did tremendous work with this congregation, knitting webs of relationship back together and really reaffirming our fundamental connection with one another in this congregation. And so for the work that Jim did here and in congregations that he served across Unitarian Universalism, we remember him and honor him this morning. We also kindle our flame for Roger Horton. Roger had been a member of this congregation since 1967. He was foundational in the Santa Barbara community. He was actively engaged in the political life of Santa Barbara and beyond. He acted as a mentor to so many. And although recent years' health problems kept him from being as engaged here and in the wider community as he once was, we remember him as he died at the age of 83 this past week. So let us take a moment now to remember Jim and Roger, and all of those who have made their home here for a time and upon whose shoulders we rest. Blessings on their journey.
Each week we encourage you to put something in our change jar, something you have experienced recently that is hopeful and indicative of positive change. This just happened to me last week, and I'm putting it in the change jar. I had been interacting with Dana for 20 years in my dealings with the county government. She and I have never met face to face over all that time. She originally called herself Dan and signed her name that way. At some point recently, I noticed she added an A to her name, feminizing it. In our conversations recently, as recently as last week, she sounded exactly the same, so I didn't think anything about it. It didn't occur to me to think about it. Then I noticed new parentheses next to her name in her emails. She, her. I thought, oh, duh, she's transitioning. Dan is transitioning, or maybe already has. And I realized also, I didn't care. I'm drawn to a person's character rather than their gender, race, or culture. In other times and places, this may have mattered, but not here and now. This is change. It's a great change. I'm very proud to be a part of this community that affirms and supports each of us on our path to wholeness, to building our own life. You do not have to give up any part of yourself or hide any part of yourself to belong here. Come as you are and be welcome.
Let us now sing together, so please rise in body or spirit and join in singing number 126, Come Thou Fount of Every Blessing. It's in the gray hymnal, or the words are on your screen.
Come thou fount of every blessing, tune our hearts to sing thy grace. Streams of mercy never ceasing, call for songs of loudest praise. While the hope of life's perfection fills our hearts with joy and love, teach us ever to be faithful, may we still thy goodness prove. Come thou fount of every vision, lift our eyes to what may come. See the lion and the young lamb dwell together in thy home. Hear the cries of war fall silent, feel our love glow like the sun. When we all serve one another, then our heaven is begun. Come thou fount of inspiration, turn our lives to higher ways. Lift our gloom and desperation, show the promise of this day. Help us find ourselves in union, help our hands tell of our love. With thine aid, O fount of justice, earth be fair as heaven above.
So, our Director of Lifespan Religious Exploration, Charla Brigante, is out this morning, which means I get to tell a story. So if you like stories, if you're a kid or a young at heart and you want to come up here and join me for a story this morning, you can sit on the rug or sit on the steps here with me. Come on up. This morning, as we talk about being at the end of January and heading in towards February, there's a holiday that honors the beginning of spring on the Celtic pagan calendar on the wheel of the year. It's the holiday of Imbolc, which happens on February 1st, and that's also sometimes called St. Bridget's Day. Bridget was a pagan figure, and later also she was a Catholic saint. And this is one story about Bridget, who was always looking out for her people, no matter which incarnation she was being referenced as. She was always looking out for the farmers and the midwives and the children and the youth and all of the people who baked bread and wove and had trades. All the people of the countryside were Bridget's people. And she was known for a beautiful cloak that she wore while she traveled around the countryside. And this is a story about her cloak. And it's a pagan story from Ireland, and it's told by Erica Helm Mead. She's the one who wrote this story down. So long, long ago in Ireland, an island way over on the other side of the Atlantic Ocean, there were a few wealthy landowners who owned large, fertile fields where all crops grew really, really well. But the poor people were forced to live up in the rocky hills where it was really hard to farm because the soil wasn't very rich or good there. And one year, the crops grew so bad that the people who were living up in the hills, well, they could barely get one onion and one carrot for their supper. That was all they had, just an onion and a carrot, not much. So Bridget went to one of the richest landholders who owned those big fields and said, you know, the harvest is very grim this year, and the peasants need your help. And the landholder replied, Bridget, I'll think on it. But in truth, if the people would only work harder, then they could fend for themselves. A few weeks passed, and the situation did not get any better. So Bridget went again to the landholder who owned these rich fields and said, "The people have no food. They're up in the hills eating grass and the clover and shamrocks that grow there. What will you do for them?" "Now, Bridget," said the landowner, "don't get pushy. I'm a busy man. Why is it you're here talking to me when you should be there talking to them who can do for themselves if they just worked a little bit harder? I don't have any time for this. Be off with you." Another week passed, and the situation was getting very serious. Bridget went again to the landholder, and this time she was angry, and she said, "You've done nothing to help. The children are starving. I demand that you give some land to these people." "Well, Bridget," said the landowner, "it couldn't be that bad. You don't look like you're starving. You have this nice warm cloak. Let's not say that I'm a stingy person, though. I'll tell you what, here's what we'll do. You go out onto that field, choose any spot you like, the very best spot if you want, and take your cloak and lay it over the ground, and all the space that your cloak covers, the people can have to grow their crops." "Tax-free?" said Bridget. "All right, tax-free," said the landowner, feeling magnanimous, "but don't ask for anything more than what your cloak can cover." So she went out the next day into the very center of the most fertile of all the fields that the landowner owns with 3 of her sisters, and she handed a corner of her cloak to each of her sisters and said, "All right now, girls, pull it tight." And they did, and then Bridget said, "Okay, now take a step backward." And they walked to the east and the west and the north and the south, and she said, "Okay, take one more step backward." And they walked, and they kept walking. And as they did, the cloak kept getting bigger and bigger. "Keep walking," shouted Bridget, and the cloak kept getting bigger and bigger until it expanded to cover the whole plain. And as usual, the afternoon came, and the landowner went up into the tower that he had on his house to look over his lands, and it looked as if snow had fallen overnight. And he saw that the rocks and the hills weren't covered in snow. And so he looked closer and saw that it was Bridget's cloak, covering the whole fields. And at that point, he realized things more powerful than him were at work. And so he fell to his knees and he said, "Mercy, Bridget, I will keep my promise. The whole of the plain will be given to the poor to grow their crops, and I will throw in 100 bags of oats to tide them over until the crops grow." And Bridget said, "Well, that's wonderful. Starting tomorrow, we'll have them down here farming in these rich lands. What are we going to do for them today?" And he said, "Fine, we'll throw a feast." And she said, "Wonderful. With containers for leftovers, right?" And he said, "Yes, of course." "Very well," said Bridget, "I'll spread the word." And the landowner said, "Well, if you spread the word just as you spread your cloak, I have no doubt that every person in the whole county will be here." And so they were. And that's our story for St. Bridget's Day. Let's send you off to your activities this morning.
We hold you in our love as you go, as you go. May your heart be at peace as you go, to nurture the spark of your precious life. We hold you in our love as you go.
I invite you now into a time of reflection, meditation, and prayer. I'm going to start off with an intro of a reading and then enter into a time of silence. So if you want to get comfortable where you're sitting right now, maybe pay attention to your breath as it moves through your body. Hold your hands open on your lap or soften your gaze. Be present to this moment once again. And sometimes as I work on a service or a sermon, what emerges is unexpected. And this service as you'll see, sort of emerged into this unexpected conversation with Walt Whitman. So in this time of our prayer and meditation, I want to start off with some words of his from the preface to his poem, Leaves of Grass. This is what you shall do. Love the earth and sun and the animals. Despise riches. Give alms to everyone that asks. Stand up for the stupid and crazy. Devote your income and labor to others. Hate tyrants. Argue not concerning God. Have patience and indulgence toward people. Take off your hat to nothing known or unknown, or to any man or number of men. Go freely with powerful, uneducated persons, and with the young, and with the mothers of families. Re-examine all you have been told in school, or church, or in any book, and dismiss whatever insults your own soul. And your very flesh shall be a great poem, and have the richest fluency not only in its words, but in the silent lines of its lips and face, and between the lashes of your eyes, and in every motion and joint of your body. As we enter into a time of quiet meditation, I invite you to consider two things: that you are a great poem in every motion and joint of your body. Spend some time feeling this, not just in your mind, but in your heart and body and breath. And once you have spent some time there in that poem of yourself, consider that every single person on this earth is also a great poem. And consider how this awareness might shift something in you, perhaps ever so slightly change you as it settles into your heart. Let us enter into a time of quiet. I invite you to stay seated as we sing together our reflective song, Spirit of Life, number 123 in the hymnal.
Spirit of life, come unto me. Sing in my heart all the stirrings of compassion. Blow in the wind, rise in the sea, move in the hand, giving life the shape of justice. Roots hold me close, wings set me free. Spirit of life, come to me, come to me.
Peter and I have a reading that we want to share with you this morning, and it's number 659 in the Gray Hymnal if you want to follow along. It's also words by Walt Whitman, but you can also just listen.
The sum of all known reverence I add up in you, whoever you are.
Those who govern are there for you. It is not you who are there for them.
All architecture is what you do to it when you look upon it.
All music is what awakes from you when you are reminded by the instruments.
The sun and the stars that float in the open air, the apple-shaped earth, and we upon it.
The endless pride and outstretching of people, unspeakable joys and sorrows.
The wonder everyone sees in everyone else they see, and the wonders that fill each moment of time forever.
It is for you, whoever you are. It is no farther from you than your hearing and sight are from you. It is hinted by nearest, commonest, readiest.
We consider Bibles and religions divine. I do not say they are not divine. I say that they have all grown out of you and may grow out of you still.
It is not they who give the life. It is you who give the life.
Will you seek afar off? You surely come back at last in things best known to you, finding the best or as good as the best.
Happiness, knowledge, not in another place, but this place. Not for another hour, but this hour. So ends our reading.
There's a popular take on Rudyard Kipling's poem, If. You've all heard it, I'm sure. If you can keep your head when everyone around you is losing theirs, you probably don't know what's going on. I don't think that's necessarily true. With focus and practice, we can retain our poise in the midst of confusion. But nowadays, we may not even know that we are confused. There are a lot of people and organizations out there offering certainty. And in this post-truth era of disinformation, it's only going to get harder to discern what has value. How to choose? Well, one way is to get rid of the idea of certainty and go with probabilities. This is how a card counter in a casino decides to bet. They know how many cards of a certain suit have been played and how many are left in the deck, so they can figure the odds of making a hand, the probability that a certain card will turn up. We can never be 100% certain, like reaching the speed of light or absolute zero. We can get pretty close, but not all the way. But at some point, the probabilities get so high, you can choose with confidence that it's going to work out. There's another way of filtering out the noise and have some fun doing it. Develop an inner persona, a virtual you that embodies what you consider best about yourself. Harry Potter had a Patronus, a giant glowing stag with huge antlers that he could summon whenever he needed guidance or protection. Hermione had an otter, playful, smart, and agile. And Ron? Does anyone remember what Ron's Patronus was? No? It was a dog, a terrier, a Jack Russell Terrier, known for their loyalty and courage, qualities which Ron embodied. This is not as fanciful as you might think. Physical or artistic objects representing higher connection have been with us for time immemorial. Talismans and symbols. Do any of our Jewish friends here this morning have a mezuzah on the lintel of their front door? Yes. On the case, inscribed on it, says, "Guardian of the Gates of Israel," and serves as both protection and a reminder of who they are and where they come from. The same is true for the red bindi dot that Hindu women apply between their brows, the location of the third eye, the eye that sees the spiritual in the world, that discerns, not separates, Maya, the impermanent, from Atma, that which is eternal. These creations, these avatars, serve as guardians and reminders of higher connection and dwell within our consciousness, slowing down intrusiveness of all sorts, demands for our time, our money, our votes, our attention. Our attention, just as an aside, do you know how much a 30-second spot on the Super Bowl costs? $7 million. This is what people are willing to pay for 30 seconds of your attention. And they don't even know if you're watching. You might be in the kitchen looking for a couple of cold ones in the refrigerator. I have a Patronus, an inner vision that I have spent years imagining into existence. Let's see if anybody here can guess what it is. It's not an animal or any living thing. I was born in July, water sign, so I'm a homebody geared towards domesticity. My vocation is architecture. Come on, any guesses? It has an address. A what? It's a house, a dwelling I have constructed over a lifetime, stone by stone, board by board. It sits on a coast somewhere in New England, outside a village. It's welcoming, it's sturdy, it's filled with light, a grand entrance to greet visitors, a comfortable space to spend time with friends, a study for contemplation, and a gym for working out, which I have to admit does not get a lot of attention these days. There's no fallout shelter or panic room, because I'm not talking about a place to hide. My inner dwelling is a place of engagement, a guest house, a base camp. Every explorer needs a secure base of operations for forays into the unknown, and every new day is an unknown. I am master of this house, and I can allow who I want to come in and who I keep out. There's one problem, however, with a house as a frame of reference. It needs maintenance, constant upkeep. As I age, this is harder to do. I become used to things as they are, or get too tired to do the work, and I need assistance. Beyond my family and friends, beyond the wonderful distractions of Santa Barbara, there is this place, our community of faith, where I come for help remodeling, my Home Depot of the soul, filled with the renewable energy of human relations. All this imagery and metaphor are meant to guide me, us, back to who we are. Because when you are grounded in that knowledge, it's very difficult to be compromised or distracted or rattled by the craziness of the world. And what are we? We're visitors, spirits in the material world, who will someday go home. So best to pack light. When I need to stay calm and carry on, I sit on the porch of my virtual domain and remember this. And also try to figure out the probabilities. There's a couple of cold ones in my virtual refrigerator. Each month we dedicate our offering to a particular organization that we support. This month it's been going to Sume Nangwa, the agency in charge of contributing material, money, and volunteer support to the Navajo Hopi community in Arizona. Will you please read with me the words of charity of giving in your order of service or on the screen? Let us be grateful when we are able to give, for many do not have that privilege. Let us be grateful for those who share their gifts with us, for we are enriched by their giving. Let us be grateful even for our needs, so that we may learn from the generosity of others.
Thank you, choir. So there are some poets whose writings land like clean, clear drops of water in your heart and mind. Maybe you have some of these poets in your own life, one or two snippets you've got memorized, or maybe even whole poems that you can recite. Phrases or stanzas that stick in your head and that rise up in your consciousness every now and then. Mary Oliver is a poet like that in a lot of Unitarian Universalist circles. Perhaps it's a poet from way back when you were in high school that stuck with you ever since that English class, and you would write it in the yearbooks of your friends. Song lyrics are poetry too, that counts. Poets who managed to distill down some aspect of life to a beautiful, succinct phrase that illuminates this truth for you. And then there are poets like Walt Whitman. Whitman, whose poetry did not distill life down to one sharp edge, but rather exploded it, expanded it, filling page after page with elaborate, free verse, bringing the reader out from small spaces into this huge field of human experience. I stumbled across the reading that Peter and I shared with you this morning when a colleague of mine read it as opening words for our UU clergy gathering that we do every month. I hadn't thought about Whitman in a long while. But when she pulled this reading from our hymnal, it sparked something that resonated with me in this particular moment in our time and in our world. After all, I had liked Whitman enough to choose some of his poetry in weddings and my own wedding 16 years ago, this Friday, as a matter of fact. But it had been a while since I had read him. So I cracked open Leaves of Grass again and a few of his other works. And it was like turning on a fire hose of humanity. The human experience tumbling through his words like an unstoppable flood. And so I started to look a little bit more into his life, and it turns out that Walt Whitman is a hard man to pin down. He is considered to be a poet of the American experience. Among many other things, he is a poet of democracy, a poet of civic power. He wrote poems about presidents and omnibus drivers, generals and prisoners, and people he met on the street. He included everyone and everything he saw around him in his work. His attitudes about gender, race, religion, nationalism, and sexuality were at once radical and also deeply rooted in the time and place in which he lived, which included the residue of white supremacy that is deeply embedded in our history. He was praised by folks like Ralph Waldo Emerson, but his work was considered obscene by many at the time, and eventually it got him fired from his government position, particularly because of his references to same-gender love and a general overt and earthy sexuality that I'm sure would still get him banned in Florida to this very day. Go back and read some of his works. When the Civil War broke out, Whitman heard that his brother, who had joined the Union Army, might have been wounded or killed, and so he went to the front to look for him. And once he was there, he was so moved by what he saw among the wounded soldiers that he stayed to be a volunteer nurse in the Army hospitals. In his most famous work, Leaves of Grass, that was first published in 1855, he continued revising and revising and revising for 33 years, publishing the last version in 1892, the same year that he died. And when I learned this, that his most famous work was not just this book that he published once and then moved on from, but this ongoing, ever-evolving manuscript that he worked and worked and worked like the very clay of experience itself. This gave me an idea of maybe why his words resonated with me right now, in our own uncertain and turbulent times. Whitman lived in turbulent times too. Perhaps the most uncertain and politically charged moment in our nation's history, when the institution of slavery was finally being uprooted, when the violent expansion and colonization of the West was in full swing, when the Civil War and the Reconstruction that followed it, including the assassination of the president, President Lincoln, forced us to redefine what it meant to be a citizen of this nation. And as such, he would have had every reason to be cynical, scared, scarred, and disillusioned by what he had seen and lived through. And yet he still wrote things like this: "You surely come back at last in things best known to you, finding the best, or as good as the best, happiness, knowledge, not in another place, but this place, not for another hour, but this hour." Tremendous words given the hour that he lived in. Whitman, although he was not a member of any religious tradition as an adult, he was raised in a Quaker family and was deeply familiar with biblical texts. It's probably not an accident that this verse of his resonates with one of the Psalms, the text that is the inspiration for the closing words that I say most every Sunday, which in the original version in the Psalm says, "For this is the day the Lord has made, let us rejoice and be glad in it." The idea that each and every day offers up gifts of beauty and love and goodness and peace, even amongst the most terrible of human circumstances. This is a theme that appears over and over again in his work. And how did he continue to find this wellspring of love and beauty? Not by insulating himself from the world, but rather through an ongoing, open, and ever-changing dialogue with the world. A commitment to relentlessly showing up, to seeing things as they are, to be fully present to the sorrow as well as the joy, and ultimately allowing himself to be changed, moved by what he saw. Right? That's what it means to be moved, right? When you say something moves you, what you're saying is it changes you. It shifts you. He was a man in constant revision of his writings, his relationships, and himself. He was relentlessly and determinedly human to the fullest of his capabilities. And that's why he's so hard to pin down, because which version of Whitman are we looking at? Which era, which iteration? And yet all of them are true. But none of them were finished. Always becoming. And if I found myself thinking, if Walt Whitman could do this, could bear witness to the horrors of his age and still let these experiences fuel his love for life and other people, keeping him willing and open to change, instead of withdrawing and calcifying and hardening in fear, letting love move him, then perhaps this is pointing to something useful for us here and now, as we grapple with our own turbulent and uncertain times. There's one view of religion that says it is here to point us toward the eternal, that which is unchanging, truths which are always and ever the same. Integrity is defined by being and living as close to the unchanging, permanent truth as possible. And in this conception of religion, our task is shed as much of that human changeability and align ourselves with the eternal. But there is another option to consider. That religion is not here to point us to the permanent. That religion is not about static truth, but rather a way of being. A way of being in the world that helps us navigate change. It can help us cultivate the spiritual practice of being present to what is, the truth of this moment, showing up over and over again to notice that life is always in motion, always becoming, always emerging in the world and within us. A wise elder colleague of mine told me once that one of the core tasks of Unitarian Universalism as a religious tradition is to help people learn to live with ambiguity. That our religion's task is to help us learn to live and even thrive with the truth of ambiguity. It's a human condition, and peace and happiness emerge when we stop fighting to pin it down. This conception of religion, of living with integrity, part of our mission statement here at the Unitarian Society, after all, it's not about finding a bedrock truth that we can stand upon forever unchanging. But rather, integrity becomes about the courage to be present to what is, even as it changes, even as we change, and to never stop letting the world in, even when we would rather not. Religion is about engagement with change as a holy conversation. And in any good conversation, there is reciprocity. We are changed by the world, even as we embrace our own agency to change the world in return. That's one of the beautiful things about this. Not only are we changed, but it means that we have the agency to effect change as well. As Whitman said, we consider Bibles and religions divine. I do not say they are not divine. I say they have all grown out of you and may grow out of you still. There is no distinction between religion as divine and religion as evolving, emerging human capacity, because human nature itself a divine thing, and so the traditions and structures that emerge from humanity have within them the same divinity that resides in each of us and in the world at large. In this way, even the concept of God becomes a moving, changing, growing, emerging thing. A divinity as much influenced by us as we are by it. Co-evolution, as it were. Divinity, humanity, the world, the truth of change, these things are not in conflict, but part of the same existence. Integrity in this world is not a call towards a static ideal, but rather asks that we remain fluid, so that we may live in such a way that our values and actions and experiences evolve too. I reflect on this concept of being open to change as necessary to the idea of integrity as we look towards this year here in January of 2024. As we look towards this year where it is possible we will see a lot of change. And the jury's still out, literally and figuratively, on how all of that change will come down. But there is this temptation when faced with this kind of uncertainty to fall back on the idea of trying to identify solid ground, to say, this is who we really are, to ask leaders and people around us to affirm or deny, to calcify on a single position, to try to uncover something stable in the chaos. It's only a natural impulse to want to find that. Some hard rock of truth that can withstand the violence of the world. We might be tempted to ask what America really is underneath all the noise of the moment. Some people will say that our work as a nation is to get back to that bedrock intent of the founding fathers, to return to these core principles articulated centuries ago: originalists, patriots, American exceptionalism. And on the other side, there are people who will say the core identity of America is foundationally corrupt. There's an unchangeable truth buried at the heart of the nation that is violent and brutal and inescapable. And this cynical argument about America can be just as much of an originalist argument as those who would call themselves patriots. this assumption that there is a fixed and permanent American identity at all. Whitman, in his moment, celebrating what he found in himself and in those around him, in bustling cities and in the wilds of nature, he was living and loving and working in this constant motion, this electric aliveness that defied categorization. I read Whitman and I find permission to live and change and grow, not just as myself, but as a community and as a nation. He reminded me not just of the joy, but also of the power to be found in looking at truth as emergent. Perhaps this attention to emergent truth, perhaps this is one thing that can help us get through this moment in our nation's history as well. Because if we are able to be changed by the world, then the world in turn is able to be changed by us. This is reciprocity. This is a two-way street, this deal of being alive. This is a divine conversation we are in, as hard as it may be. And that gives me hope. America is neither a beacon of liberty nor an empire of violence, but rather something that is constantly emerging. And we have the ability through our actions to influence that truth as it emerges, to center love rather than fear, to remain fluid even when we feel stuck, to tip the scales toward a relentless and determined embrace of one another in all of our messy humanity. May we continue to be in that divine conversation through whatever may come. May it be so. Blessed be, and amen. Let us sing together once more, Rise in Spirit or Body, for number 128, For All That Is Our Life. The words are on the screen or in your gray hymnal.
For all that is our life, we sing our thanks and praise. For all life is a gift, which we are called to use to build the common good and make our own days glad. For needs which others serve, for services we give, for work and its rewards, for hours of rest and love, we come with praise and thanks. For all that is our life, for sorrow we must bear, for failures, pain, and loss, for each new thing we learn, for fearful hours that pass, we come with praise and thanks. For all that is our life, for all that is our life, we sing our thanks and praise. For all life is a gift, which we are called to use to build the common good and make our own days glad.
So go ahead and stay right where you are and put your hands on your heart or hold them open, or if you have permission to hold hands with the person next to you, go ahead and do so. However it is that you open yourself up to feeling connected to that larger love that moves through us and among us and beyond us. And as you go out into this beautiful and heartbreaking world, may the light of love shine upon you, out from within you, be gracious unto you, and bring you peace. For this is the day we are given. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. And let us call out a blessing.
Call out